Y'all really need to take just a few minutes and go watch the piece that the New York Times opinion page put out. And share it with your friends who don't have social media. I want to show a little bit of it here and talk about it.
It doesn't start with them kidnapping you.
It does not start with our exile.
They don't stuff the ballot boxes.
It starts with the government making hints.
It starts with overcomplicated red tape.
With the law.
With retribution.
Fake narratives and financial attacks.
Democracy and rule of law is more fragile than Americans think.
Russia was banning writers, but I was thinking like, I'm not writing books. Then it was banning teachers. And I thought, okay, I'm not a teacher. This is the big mistake. Because of course it came to me. The first alarm that we should have noticed was in 2001 when NTV, the independent channel, was taken over.
I just posted about how the Cheeto administration is gunning for NPR and PBS. That's free, independent, publicly funded journalism.
And angry we were, and we even went to the protest rally, but then it was cold and we had so many other independent TV channels, so we just went home and forgot about them.
My uncle, who until recently was Prime Minister of Singapore, had this pattern of using police investigations and criminal prosecutions to dispose of or exile his opponents. There have been malicious prosecutions against two leaders of different opposition parties.
I know many things have happened in the last week and a half, but let's not forget that in the middle of the night, the Cheeto administration attempted to illegally, in violation of the Inspectors General Act, terminate the positions of the Inspectors General. Just like in his first administration, he's weaponizing his Department of Justice to go after his political enemies, already firing long-standing members of the DOJ who investigated him in the last administration, folks who worked under Jack Smith.
Elimination of gender studies was the first step towards the restriction of academic freedom.
When it would be too obvious to prosecute someone for being an enemy of the state, you have to make something else up.
They came after us with the excuse that we had not submitted our financial reports. They didn't give us an opportunity to appeal.
I posted a private Facebook comment to my friends only, and the Singapore government went after me with a criminal prosecution.
Attorney General's Chambers has asked the High Court to fine Lee Sheng-wu at least $15,000.
The steps were gradual, and every one of them was unbelievable for me. Looking back, it had been obvious that the government had been going in this direction.
It should be obvious to everybody in the United States of America less than 2 weeks in that this is the direction we are going in. There is no slow roll of this coup. There is no slow roll of this fascist dictatorship. They are speed running it with their shock doctrine. I know that it can be hard to process the inundation of things that are happening right now, but I really encourage you to go watch that whole video, because you will see how many of the things that they mention in that video as steps that were enacted in their governments as an authoritarian takeover, how many of those things have already been attempted by the Cheeto administration in the last week and a half.
Controversial security bills into law.
And then he does what he wants.
Would designate certain journalists and bloggers as foreign agents.
He was testing the society. Would it be okay for them if I shut down just one channel and then maybe one radio station?
This is what's happening right now. How much will we tolerate? How much can he keep piling on? And we will put up with it. How far can he push us? How many rights can he strip away? How many indecent and illegal things can he do?
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
If you're used to living in a democratic society, you don't expect that a government could just go ahead and close a university.
I will fire the radical left accreditors that have allowed our colleges to become dominated by Marxist maniacs and lunatics.
Right now, there is no independent media outlets in Russia. No freedom of speech.
ABC, they're the most dishonest, in my opinion, the most dishonest news organization.
My uncle had taken his own personal lawyer and made that lawyer Attorney General.
President-elect Trump's new pick for Attorney General, Pam Bondi. She was also on Trump's legal team during his first impeachment trial.
I call my Attorney General. I say, listen, indict him. Well, he hasn't done anything wrong that we know of. I don't know. Indict him on income tax evasion. You'll figure it out.
I wish that I would have paid more attention to those flashes of authoritarianism. We ignored it because the economy was going really, really well.
I should have known. I'm a sociologist.
And I blame myself.
You want to think it's not happening because otherwise you might have to do something.
Take your finances out of the country. Try not to have a physical office space. They will seize all of your assets.
It is better to fight.
Every person unlawfully jailed, unlawfully harmed is your business.
It is better to refuse rather than to give in and hope that somebody else will be the check and balance for you.
Do you hear what these folks are saying? They have lived through what we are going through now. Some of their countries are still mired in authoritarianism. Some of them cannot go home. Some of them have lost their countries. Interesting that the authoritarian rulers, the dictators of those countries, Vladimir Putin and Viktor Orban, are two men that the Cheeto admires, wants to emulate, praises, kisses up to. Please listen. Please understand the severity of what is happening now. We have got to figure out how to stop this. We have got to hold on to whatever vestiges of our democracy are left, whatever freedoms we have left. We have got to get coordinated. And we have got to do something. These folks are warning us of what lays in store for us if we ignore what is happening now and we roll over and let it happen to us, the American people. It is not too late to shut it down, to stop it. I fully believe it's not too late for us to save ourselves. There is a deeply concerning piece of news that came out today, and you need to understand what it means and how we're going to react to it. So please like and comment and reshare and help me boost this post. You understand how a fascist regime rises to power, how it dismantles a democracy, strips you of your freedoms, installs itself, and forms a dictatorship. And if you understand that the Cheeto and his Project 2025 administration have had that goal all along, they are carrying out a coup in slow motion, not even that slow. You knew that this was coming. I've heard a number of political scientists, historians, experts on the rise of fascism say when they come for independent media, when they come for journalists, that's when you know what's going on. Right, and we saw the Cheetos sue Legacy News, and we saw news buckle and settle when they didn't have to, when they would have won in court. Today's news is much more concerning, however. The Cheeto has demanded that the FCC open an investigation into our publicly funded radio. That's National Public Radio and the Public Broadcasting Service. I encourage you to go to NPR's website and listen to David Folkenflick's whole piece. It's only 3 minutes long. The claim from this administration is that NPR and PBS are violating federal law, making it sound like their underwriting announcements are essentially commercials, which are prohibited on public broadcasting. This is a blatant attempt to intimidate public radio, which the FCC actually does not have direct control over. This is a threat meant to exert control over and possibly dismantle NPR and PBS. Lawyers who know the case say that there are not widespread violations of the Communications Act and that this is a scare tactic. They know that underwriting keeps public broadcasting on the air. And this investigation is going to be an attempt to defund public radio, to make sure that the only media in America is bought and paid for by corporate interest, by billionaires, by the Cheeto. So how do we respond to this? Are we going to freak out? Are we all getting our passports and trying to figure out how to get visas and leave? Well, no, the vast majority of Americans cannot do that. It's only the privileged few who have the opportunity to leave. Most of us have to stay and fight. We are living and we are going to be continuing to live in a country where fascism has risen to power. We need to look to our historians, our political scientists, to understand that attacks on the free press are one of the logical steps in that progression of fascism attempting to take over. So we knew this was coming. We do not need to freak out, but we need to understand the severity of the situation. We need to give it a few days to see how this shakes out, but we also need to be keenly aware of how quickly this administration wants to step through all of those processes to dismantle our democracy, to dismantle every last system that could possibly hold these folks to account. I have said before, I think these are steps that we are going to have to live through. I think that this is something, we're in it, we have to write it out, and it's going to cause suffering and death for a lot of people. That is not okay at all. And it's horrible that the American people said, this is the only way we are willing to learn the lessons that need to be learned. is to go through this thing. But we really need to not fool ourselves into thinking that this is less than it is. And if we look at history, if we look at other nations who've gone through this, the next steps are going to be things like declaring martial law, ceasing elections. And those things cannot be allowed to happen.
Not one journalist stood up for, and not even herself, she didn't stand up for herself when the president said, and I don't remember what her name is,
Caitlin Collins.
He said, that wasn't a very smart question, even for you. It was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen for anyone in that room not to call out what he just did, demeaning a reporter for asking about the names of the families, the names of the people who died in that plane crash.
Okay, no hate to this creator at all, but if that is the most disgusting thing you have seen the decrepit Cheetos say or do in a press conference or an interview, you've not watched him very much. She went on to say how shameful it was that no other reporters stepped up and defended her, and that she didn't even really defend herself. This is a good time to remind folks that legacy media is in the pocket of this administration. Caitlin Collins got her start on the alt-right network, The Daily Caller. And she and others on CNN have been pandering to the right for years. In fact, CNN's decision to hire her out of something I wouldn't even call a news network, it's a propaganda machine for the right, and then platform her as a credible journalist. Remember how she was the one who chose to do the town hall with Trump and did a terrible job of it in exchange for getting a, real cushy anchor position. I'm 0% surprised that nobody stood up for her and that she didn't even defend herself. There is no limit to how much these folks will demean and debase themselves to curry favor from this administration in order to advance themselves, increase their wealth, try to advance themselves in the corporate media ecosystem. Once again, succession imitates life. These guys are perfectly willing to play bore on the floor as long as they get to keep their jobs, as long as they continue to have access to Logan Roy. Legacy media has no credibility. It is corporate media. We have a government run by corporations, by oligarchs. We are living in a plutocracy. Media is not going to stand up to the Cheeto administration. Sure, there are a few credible journalists still operating within that ecosystem, but it and a large portion of the press corps are there to uphold the system. They profit from the system. Caitlin Collins has profited herself by prostrating herself. She started as an in-the-field reporter for the Daily Caller and is now an anchor at CNN. I think her politics have changed that much in that time. CNN serves up pro-Trump propaganda on a daily basis. None of this behavior from this particular contingent of journalists should be surprising to you. I'll let the president backhand them all day and say, please, sir, may I have another? As long as it means they get their press corps badge. They get their big, fat, cushy salary. I'm more than happy to play bore on the floor.